Hello everyone, here I come! Okay, so I've tried making this video a couple of times, but it's just never really, Well, I was about to make an excuse, but I'm just lazy. What I should say is, I've tried making it, but the thing is, every single time I've tried it, I've taken it very, very seriously, like I'm creating some sort of literary masterpiece. This think piece that I'm making here is like gonna solve all of the world's problems. It's like, girl, you're talking about a freaking cartoon from the 2000s. It's not a major holiday.
We really don't give a fuck. It's not a major holiday.
But then on the other hand, it is also Avatar, so maybe I was actually really right for taking it seriously. It's just I can't keep that energy up. It's why am I kind of giving Southern? What I wanted to say was that I think as a longtime Avatar: The Last Airbender fan, I have seen a lot of discourse throughout the years, obviously the most prevalent of which concerns the shipping between either Katara and Aang or Zuko and Katara. So in this video, I hope to dispel some of the rumors, the lies, the salacious lies that have been published about both Katara as a character, Kataang as a relationship, Zutara as a relationship, and the writing of the overall relationship arcs that we were gifted as viewers. I think the most important thing to start with is obviously the question of what even is love? Why do we fall in love? Why do we chase it? What does it mean to love somebody? And now I'm going to completely dismiss that question to talk about the third season of Avatar: The Last Airbender. My favorite season of any TV show ever is the third season of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Among other things, the reason for this has to do with the run of episodes leading up to the absolute triumph that is the 4-part finale. I think a huge part of the reason behind this is because the show let one of its biggest payoffs actually get to shine for its deserved amount of time. And it really feeds the viewer some of Avatar's finest of episodes. What I am of course talking about is Zuko's redemption finally being completed. Zuko's redemption arc had 2.5 seasons of build-up, and it had one of the best scenes of the entire show that finalized his turn to the good side. Zuko didn't just automatically get to be part of the main gang consisting of Aang, Katara, Sokka, and Toph once he turned though. The writers thankfully understood how important Zuko's character arc was to the show and really let the change simmer for a good while. And this iconically resulted in the amazing string of episodes that Toph so graciously named the life-changing field trips with Zuko, which, like the name clearly implies, centered on 3 different field trips that Aang, Sokka, and Suki, and last but not least, Katara respectively went on with Zuko to really cement his place in the group. I feel like other shows would just let Zuko be in the background after his arc is finished, but no, we actually get to enjoy it here. Which just shows why Avatar is so good. It knows what the audience is going to want to see. It's not like, done with that, time to move on to the next character. Which is also a valid way of writing for a cast with so many amazing character arcs and plot lines, by the way, but it just doesn't feel quite as satisfying as what we got. Because it's actually fun seeing Zuko. It's actually fun seeing Zuko be on our side finally. And it's not limited to a couple of character interactions or cool moments. We get to really make this our new normal. Which is part of the reason why Zuko feels like such an essential part of the gang by the end of the series, even though he's been part of it for a considerable less amount of time than everyone else, minus Suki, of course. Could you imagine Suki going on field trips with all of the gang? That would be too good. That would be too good, actually. That would be excellent. Avatar is just one of those shows. It makes me really giddy. I don't know. And one of the best things about Avatar is that the characters have something to actually do even once their character arcs are done. But maybe it's a good thing that most shows don't have these kinds of episodes after huge changes though, because they probably wouldn't actually be enjoyable. That's weirdly how I feel about relationship arcs a lot of the time. Like, yes, it'd be nice if some stories had their relationship arcs completed in the middle of the show, since sometimes their conclusions feel shoehorned into the finale. But then I think about the actual writing that some people come up with for established couples in their stories, and I'm just like, well, girl, don't rock the boat. I could probably make a whole video that would be an hour long or something about different couples that actually got together in the middle of the show and eventually showed that they weren't compatible together because the writing was just not there. The funniest examples of this phenomenon are always the rom-coms that end with the two main leads getting together, and then in the sequel, they break up immediately so that there can be a plot. And if you watch the movies directly one after the other, it's like, y'all couldn't last even a week? And it's so sad because you end up questioning why you even wanted the relationship to happen in the first place. Which just goes to show that coming up with a cool story is just one part of the process of creating an amazing movie or show. You have to make the audience care about your characters and then also continue to care about your characters as they go through changes. Anyway, I've been going on for too long about this. Let's just get back to Avatar.
This is gonna be so bad. Okay.
Katara's field trip with Zuko was the final out of these Zuko rendezvous episodes, and it deals with Katara getting revenge on her mother's killer. To keep things short, Katara did not like Zuko joining the gang, but went along with it only because Aang said that he wanted Zuko to be his firebending teacher. Of course, Aang, Sokka, and Toph all had their issues with Zuko from before since, he hunted and tried to kill them multiple times, but they were still able to accept Zuko relatively quickly. The reason behind specifically Katara's apprehension was that she actually thought Zuko had changed all the way back in the finale of season 2, where they shared a moment that people had a reaction to. Don't worry, we'll get to it. But, of course, because Zuko was not ready to actually change yet, she was quickly betrayed, and she had yet to get over that betrayal when this episode started. So Zuko finds out, after interrupting Sokka and Suki's quality time, that Katara and Sokka's mother was killed by a Fire Nation soldier during an attack on their home. To make her like him, Zuko told Katara that he knew who was responsible for her mother's death, and that he could bring her to him. Katara swiftly agrees and they decide to fly off. But this doesn't happen without a hitch. When Aang and Sokka find out about what Zuko and Katara are planning on doing, one of the tensest arguments of the entire show develops.
What's going on?
We're going to find the man who took my mother from me.
And what exactly do you think this will accomplish?
I knew you wouldn't understand.
Stop! I do understand! How do you think I felt about the Sandbenders when they stole Appa? And when I found out what happened to my people?
She needs us, Aang. This is about getting closure and justice.
I don't think so. I think it's about getting revenge.
Maybe it is. Maybe that's what I need. Maybe that's what he deserves.
You sound like Jet.
Katara, she was my mother too. But I think Aang might be right.
Then you didn't love her the way I did.
Katara!
Wait! What is the tea? The girls are fighting! No!
So I'm just gonna say this clearly now, and I'm gonna say it only once. I am not gonna bash on Katara in this essay at all. I think there are a lot of things to say about characters, themes, and shipping in this episode alone, but the way I see some people treat what Katara said like it was some sort of hate crime is just ridiculous. I'll get more into the actual contents, the meat and bones of the arguments later, but I generally dislike the fervent hatred of characters for perceived slights when said slights would be deemed way less offensive had they been done by any other character that wasn't already labeled as annoying or unlikable for whatever reason by the viewers. My opinion is that that attitude is infinitely more annoying than anything Katara has ever said or done, and you'd get further in an argument if you just stated outright that you hated Katara because of her personality, rather than any actual action, and had left it at that. It just feels obvious that you're trying to make her seem worse than she actually is, just to justify some grievance that you have with somewhat uptight or motherly personality types. It reminds me of that time I found out that there are people who genuinely think that Pam Beesly is like a worse person than Dwight or Michael in The Office. Which, if you haven't watched The Office, Michael and Dwight are both, for different reasons, very difficult people to be around, and have made multiple really, really downright cruel decisions and mistakes throughout the course of the story. And I really like Michael, and he's probably my favorite character in The Office, but I also just can't put blinders on when it comes to characters I like. And I get the feeling that some people do that with the characters that they really, really love, rather than just saying that, oh yeah, I like Michael more as a character, or I don't really like the direction that the writers took Pam's character in, or they just don't like her because of her personality. They just think she's annoying and she bugs them for whatever reason. Instead, it has to be this sort of objective, no, she's a bad person thing. And it's just, it always just rubs me the absolute wrong way. And when it comes to Katara, I don't think I've ever seen anyone say that Katara is poorly written or a weak addition to the cast. Just that they dislike her presence in it, which is weird to me. Side note, this will come up every now and then, but it's sort of funny seeing the difference between how people engage with stories, because some people will go from critiquing the show based off of merit or quality to critiquing it based off of plot lines or characters that made them feel negative emotions. I don't really know how to explain it, but thinking that a character's personality is annoying is not the same as thinking that a character's personality is poorly written. And it sometimes feels like people conflate those two things or mistake one for the other, you know? Now, what I find interesting about this scene in question, as well as the discourse surrounding it, is that Katara is right. Right? We all know that she is factually correct. The things she is saying are all true. She's not lying. She's not exaggerating. She is relaying true information. Sokka does have a different relationship to their dead mother than she does. Katara doesn't even say that she loved their mother more than him, just that he didn't love her the same. Which, yes, could be understood as her placing her love for their mother above that of Sokka's love, but I would argue that she's just trying, although I admit rather poorly, to express that she doesn't feel understood by Sokka, even though they share a similar experience, because their relationship to that experience, and to the person at the center of that experience, their mother Kaya, is simply not comparable. Sokka doesn't think about his mother constantly, he doesn't wrestle with his grief nearly as much or as often as Katara does, and the issues that Sokka faced after his mother's death were completely different from the ones Katara faced.
I'm not sure I can remember what my mother looked like. It really seems like my whole life, Katara's been the one looking out for me. And now, when I try to remember my mom, Katara's is the only face I can picture.
So the reason why I think Katara was wrong in saying what she said has nothing to do with the validity of her statement, and it has more to do with the fact that she said those things to push him away. I think she was almost trying to alienate herself away from the people who love her and who were trying to help her in this moment, but she didn't feel helped by them and they weren't saying things that she wanted to hear, so she lashed out. But what is interesting is that Katara doesn't apologize for this either, and I think that's because this isn't about Sokka or Aang, and the people who make it about them are kind of missing the point. Because just like how Aang lashed out during Appa's Lost arc, Katara should be and is allowed by the story to be imperfect without getting on her knees afterwards and profusely apologizing for having a human moment. In real life, I do think you should right your wrongs, even when the reason behind your wrong was immense emotional distress, but Avatar is a TV show with a limited runtime, and Katara lashing out was not really the point of the episode. It wasn't a main characters have a squabble and have to apologize to each other at the end kind of episode. Avatar has had a couple of those before, focusing on petty drama that gets resolved at the end with a smile and a hug. But here, this episode wants to deal with Katara's grief and her forgiveness. So Katara going up to Sokka saying, "Sup bro, sorry for getting angry," while not being a bad idea for a scene, is still a new scene that would take away screen time from what the episode was actually about, to show us a type of conflict resolution that we've already seen multiple times between the two of them. Instead, Katara's harsh words are used as a metric for how far she's willing to go in this episode, and they get to be just that. So now that we've seen it from Katara's perspective, let's go a little bit over to Sokka and Aang. From what I've seen online, the amount of people who are on Katara's side during this argument is significantly lower than the other way around. But I still think it's interesting to talk about what her defenders have to say, since there is a lot of overlap between these people and die-hard Zutara shippers. The argument is basically this: Katara is the de facto mother of the gang throughout the entire show. She is always picking up the pieces when the others are going through emotional turmoil, and when she finally gets to have her time in the lashing out spotlight, the same people who have relied on her in their moments of unrest treat her like she's being someone unreasonable who just needs to calm down. Aang specifically gets criticized for butting in when it wasn't his business and for being condescending and preachy. They didn't understand and they acted like they did. They didn't like her behavior because she wasn't allowed to hurt in their opinions, as opposed to all the other members of the group who were giving grace in their darkest moments. They were discomforted by her rage, and this is a natural consequence of misogyny and its response to female rage. I hope I did an alright job summarizing the arguments. I want to say, as someone who is pretty well versed in Avatar, the idea that Katara is specifically held to some standard by the gang who isn't allowed to get cranky isn't really that true. It is, however, true that she is usually being the emotional support for the others. But I think verbalizing it in that way is sort of not acknowledging that all of the main group of friends have different strengths, and they all rely on each other in different ways when they need to. Sokka is practical, he is in charge of a lot of the strategic planning and often has to make difficult decisions when Katara and Aang get swept up in situations. He's also funny, which is actually important for keeping up morale, which we see in the episode where he goes to train with Piandao. And Aang is almost always cheery and positive. He is wise beyond his years and incredibly introspective, not to mention he is the literal avatar, which is an enormous responsibility, and his friends rely on him hugely because of this, obviously. And by the way, one of the first things Aang does when he meets Katara is tell her that she's still just a kid.
I haven't done this since I was a kid!
You still are a kid.
If anything, he is the only one who's ever stated outright that Katara shouldn't have to take on this motherly role. Aang lost his people. Aang thought he lost one of the last links he had to said people. It is not ridiculous of him to try to relate to Katara through this experience. It is also not some sort of thinly veiled attempt at making Katara feel stupid for having feelings, as some people claim. It is simply a friend reaching out. It is just not coming through to that friend. Similarly, Sokka told Katara that he lost the same mother as she did, not because he wants her to not express her feelings, but because he wants to tell her that she can deal with the pain of losing their mother in a way that doesn't result in her hurting someone else. So, about Aang and Sokka being uncomfortable with Katara expressing negative emotions, according to me, the arbiter of anything and everything, they were doing no such thing. The closest Aang actually gets to being quote-unquote uncomfortable with Katara's anger is him nerdily saying, and what exactly do you think this will accomplish? God, he's such a little leading questions rascal, isn't he? How dare he? He also tells her that she sounds like Jet, which could be interpreted as him being discomforted by her little outburst. I've seen some people comment on how this is a ridiculous thing for Aang to say, but I don't think Aang was comparing Katara to Jet because killing innocents and killing war murderers is the same in his head. Rather, I think he noticed the very real hatred in Katara's heart at that moment, the real want for vengeance that she had, and he pointed it out. Katara rebuts this, but she doesn't quite understand what he's trying to say, I don't think. There's a reason why Katara fell for Jet when she first met him. Katara is attracted to his way of viewing the world. There is a reason why she felt such a deep connection with Jet and then later Hama, two people who spend their whole lives seeking revenge and who basically form their identities around the hatred that they feel for the Fire Nation. This is probably also why she feels so betrayed by Jet and Hama when they inevitably show her what it means to be that kind of person and what that road leads to. Vengeance and hatred are completely valid feelings to have, but they're still very unhealthy when they take hold of your entire soul. So, is Aang upset with Katara because she's not the perfect little angel that he painted her out to be in his head? Or is he worried about her because she's going down an unhealthy path that he himself was close to going down before? What I will say is this, Aang and Sokka were definitely not able to meet Katara where she was at. Their opinions and unsolicited advice weren't really helpful and they didn't connect with her. And that's why I think she needed Zuko in that moment. Speaking of, 'cause you're hot and you're cold, you're yes and you're no, you're in and you're out, it's up when it's down. Okay, so what does this even mean for the shipping? Because at the end of the day, that is the only important thing to discuss, right? What I really like about Zuko in this episode is that unlike Aang and Sokka, Zuko lets Katara explore her darker side, her trauma, fully with no holds barred. And I really like how the quote-unquote life-changing field trips with Zuko episodes really are field trips that only Zuko could go on. Aang and Zuko need to improve their firebending, and as the only firebenders there, they go on a field trip to figure it out. Zuko also has a close connection to the plot of the episode due to his family's history with the dragons, who were the original firebenders. In the Boiling Rock two-parter, Zuko's life as a high-ranking royal also gave him pertinent information about where Sokka's father, and Suki as we also find out, could be. He connects with Sokka's desire to regain his honor and offers his war balloon as their ride. I think it's taken for granted a little bit that actually giving characters not just one, but multiple reasons to be somewhere doing something is not always easy. And for these episodes to interweave so many different important plots and character beats so seamlessly that you as a viewer don't even notice how much just went down in the span of a couple of episodes is nothing short of spectacular. The Southern Raiders follows the pattern set up by the episodes prior, being not only an extremely interesting watch, but also pertinent to Katara and Zuko's characters, both respectively and also their relationship to each other. Zuko was the only one who could have gone on this mission with Katara, both for practical but also thematic reasons. Zuko can give Katara what Aang and Sokka are not willing to give her in this episode. The reason why Zuko is the one who's able to meet Katara where she's at is infinitely interesting to me. Zuko and Katara are far from the only characters in the show who deal with dark pasts or insecurities. So this is about more than just them having a traumatic upbringing, obviously. But rather, Zuko, unlike for example Aang and Sokka, is actually still very much in his past for most of the series. And up until just a couple of episodes prior, Zuko defines himself through his struggle. His trauma is what makes him him, according to himself. Zuko says, "He says I was lucky to be born. I don't need luck though. I don't want it. I've always had to struggle and fight, and that's made me strong. It's made me who I am." Of course, as we all know, Zuko eventually lets go of this image of himself and he learns to fuel his passions through other things, not just his anger. He also has to let go of his need to be validated by his father to be able to move forward, but there are still things that plague him by the end of the series. Zuko's trauma storyline gets continued in the comics by exploring his feelings about his mother who ran away from her family when Zuko was still a young boy. He has not fully accepted every single part of his past, and is therefore still somewhat stuck in it even after the final episode of the series. Katara, likewise, has an open wound during the entire runtime of the show when it comes to her mother's death, and nowhere is this more clear than in this episode. Even when she has the chance to see her mother's murderer, the closest she gets to forgiveness is deeming death a useless punishment, and understanding that revenge wouldn't solve her problems. That's how I read it, at least. Katara herself seems to be conflicted about why she decided against it, even though she had been planning and plotting the entire episode on cutting that man open with an ice slice right up until the last possible moment. Not choosing revenge is obviously not the same as forgiveness, but the episode still lets Katara go through the complete journey of forgiveness by having her forgive Zuko in the end instead. So this, I think, is the reason why Zutara are so compatible on an aesthetic level. And when I say aesthetic level, I'm not just talking about the visual components of their designs, for example. But let's be honest, we all know putting two characters respectively in a little bit of blue and a little bit of red really gets the shippers going. No, what I'm mainly talking about is the appreciation of beauty, the beauty of their compatibility, of their inner worlds, if that makes sense. And I know aesthetic is an extremely powerful thing. It enforces dynamics and chemistry as well as understanding. So even if I were to argue that Katara and Aang get along better and have more aligned goals and hopes throughout the show, do Aang and Katara even have an aesthetic compatibility? Visually speaking, Aang looks very much like a child, which makes it undeniable that this is a relationship between two kids. Meanwhile, both Katara and Zuko have more quote-unquote gray area designs, making it easier to view them as older than they are, despite the age gap between Aang and Katara and Zuko being the exact same. Aang and Katara also don't have a very big contrast between them in terms of personality and role in the story. They're both cheery, nice, helpful people on the good side. It's certainly a weaker aesthetic and dynamic at first glance compared to the mature, cool, fierce, and angsty aesthetic put forward by Zutara that's filled to the brim with contrast and friction. I think I'd be remiss to not talk about what Katara symbolizes and represents when it comes to femininity and sexism, both within the Avatar universe, but also what she represents to the audience in general. She's a pretty polarizing character, partly because of this episode. Either you love her or hate her. Either she's the most annoying character on Earth who was unnecessarily mean to fan favorite character Sokka, or she's the misunderstood girl boss who's unjustly hated for being a woman. For me, I really adore Katara. She's an excellently written character with loads of poignant and heartbreaking moments. She's also the emotional center of the show in my opinion. Yes, Zuko and Aang are more important when it comes to the themes of introspection, change, and the self, also making up two halves of the whole of yin and yang. But Katara fully embodies the hope and love that is intrinsic to what Avatar is all about.
We cannot give up hope, for hope is all we have.
In the world of Avatar, she's the one that has to deal with the most outright sexism. She's also the one who stands up against it the most frequently. Avatar in general has a sort of straight-to-the-point way of dealing with the contentious issue of sex and gender. It kind of has this sort of relaxed approach to it, you know, a little bit of sexism here, a little bit of sexism there. Who cares? No, but really, it's not that it's without nuance or that it's not worth dissecting. It's more just that you're never really confused on whether an act of sexism is supposed to be seen as good or bad in this series. It's still a kid's cartoon after all. When thrown into situations where Katara has to stand up for herself, or her entire gender for that matter, Katara remains fervently steadfast in her beliefs that gender shouldn't play a role in who gets to do what in society and who deserves respect. Suffice it to say, it makes complete sense why a character like Katara would strike a chord in so many of the female watchers. Unlike Toph, who is more stereotypically boyish, Katara is constantly fluctuating between being a badass who's taking down people twice her age and being a graceful, kind, and nurturing person, almost acting like a mother figure to the rest of the gang. Side note, Toph actually gets to express her femininity in the episode The Tales of Ba Sing Se, where Katara shows her that it's okay to want to be pretty and that it doesn't make you shallow or stupid or embarrassing to explore your style. Which is a really nice message to send out, I think, especially with a character like Toph, because a lot of the time it feels as if she is treated like she's one of the boys and she's too cool for these girly things. So with all of these characteristics making Katara a prime candidate for being someone any woman with any sort of trauma regarding their gender or sexism as a whole to project onto, as well as her being regarded by a lot of watchers as some sort of whiny and over-emotional annoyance, the response to this episode was inevitable. Girl, I just read the sentence. The response to this episode was as inevitable as the cabbage man losing his cabbages. Okay. So now we've reached what I would call a crossroads. There is one question that is at the forefront of my mind. Should Katara be written in a way to send a message that is about not having to quiet down your feelings to, avoid making men uncomfortable? Or should she be written to support a grander narrative that, at the end of the day, is all about a 12-year-old boy? I want to say that the answer to this question isn't either or. She should be both of these things, and it should be more than possible to write a main character in a way that is multifaceted, deep, and still important to the main plot and the thematic message of the story. Katara should both play an important role in Aang's grander narrative as well as be her own person with her own problems. So why is it that Katara is labeled by so many people as just Aang's girl? I've seen a lot of people who specifically have a really close connection to Katara claim that this episode, as well as Kataang's relationship arc as a whole, proves that Katara's agency and feelings are discarded the second they get in the way of Aang's. And maybe this is the answer to why people are so split on her character, and Kataang versus Zutara as a whole. So before I explore this, I need to get something off of my chest, okay? Just hear me out. I think a lot of people, when it comes to Katara and Zutara, are very clouded by their own biases. I'm sorry. I get it. Bias affects all of us. But with this case, I honestly just need to come out and say that I think that the way that a lot of Zutara stans in particular are reading the moment that transpired in the Southern Raiders, the argument scene, the way they're reading the situation, especially Aang and Sokka's behaviors, the way they're reading it is incorrect. I've seen people call them uncaring, even cruel for the way that they treated her in this scene. The simple truth is that Aang and Sokka don't tell Katara that she's in the wrong for feeling any type of way at any point in this episode. Sokka tries to relate to her even, and it completely blows up in his face. Aang also tells her that he knows what she's going through. Katara is unequivocally the one being the most cruel in this argument. Yes, there is always room for interpretation, but some things are left unambiguous. I never want to tell people that they're bad or toxic for understanding a scene or dynamic differently than I do. I just can't dismiss the very real fact that experiences shape the way we consume and decipher information. Thus, it would be impossible for me to talk about this phenomenon that I see with fans of not just Katara, but countless female characters, without relaying that I see a lot of hurt and unhealthiness within the people who project themselves onto Katara and make her some sort of unfortunate victim of incompetent writing for a female character by male writers who just don't understand or appreciate her enough as she is. This doesn't go for everyone, of course, and some people just like being dramatic online, which same. But according to these people, the writers want to change Katara, fit her into some sort of mold. And this alone is bad and cruel and heartless. Of course, somewhat disregarding the fact that she was always supposed to fit into a mold. You can't not make a character behave in a way that you made them behave. That's just not how writing or logic works. My senses tell me that most people know that characters are written to fit into roles and plots, or created with some sort of purpose in mind. It's just that they don't like feeling it happen. They just don't like noticing it. And really the crux of the issue is that the mold that Katara was fit into wasn't one that these people liked. When people grow from trauma, it's rarely clean or seamless. People gain calluses and scars from bad experiences, and they change the way they see other people and their intentions because of it. This is how Aang can go from being a genuine and kind-hearted person in the show to being some sort of stereotype of the nice guy trope in some people's opinions. Someone who doesn't care about the object of his affections, feelings, or wants, and gets upset when said object behaves unlike his perfect, nice, and attentive idealized version of it. And rather than this being an instance of Katara just being in the wrong, it instead gets warped and Aang has to be wrong for not being okay with Katara being wrong. I cannot stress this enough, Katara is not perfect, and she shouldn't have to be. Her way of understanding the world is not always helpful, and it is completely okay for her friends and family to react negatively to her choosing to go down an unhealthy path.
Love your smile.
The first time Aang ever sees Katara, he is immediately interested in her and wants to befriend her, asking her out on the only sort of date appropriate for kids their age.
Will you go penguin sledding with me?
Throughout the show, Aang's initial interest in her grows into infatuation and then later love. Unlike Zuko and Katara, Aang and Katara don't start off with a rocky relationship. They immediately feel very strong and positive connections to each other, both because of the other person's personality and strength of character.
Is banished from our village.
Then I'm banished too. Come on, Aang, let's go.
3 things I don't play about myself, my money, or my man. Mention one of them and best believe I'm gonna be at your head.
And what the other person represents as a whole. Whenever they argue in the earlier seasons, it's usually about petty stuff that children would typically argue about, and those moments are always sandwiched between cute resolutions, amicable moments, and heartfelt and poignant displays of love, trust, and partnership. So when they have this huge disagreement that doesn't end on a sweet note between them at the end of the episode, it signals something to the viewer. It signals that this is an important difference between Aang and Katara, one that cannot be resolved with simple sorries and I forgive yous. This difference is, I think, explained by how they treat the act of forgiveness and revenge.
Now that I know we can find him, I feel like I have no choice.
You do have a choice. Forgiveness.
That's the same as doing nothing.
It's easy to do nothing, but it's hard to forgive.
It's not just hard, it's impossible.
Aang as a character grows a lot from his past. He is quick to forgive and he acts with empathy. And he becomes extremely introspective during the course of the series. The moments where he gets tested, where he gets overwhelmed, the Avatar state is proof of not only how harmful hatred can be to others, but also how painful it is to be overtaken by such emotions. I have a candy in my mouth. I'm really sorry. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea while I was recording, but now
I'll do the best I can when I got.
I really love how the Avatar state is able to be both a symbol of Aang's loss of identity, freedom, and his surrender to power, but also be something awesome that makes him be able to do cool stuff like this. I know this is sort of cornplatey of me, but I think power-ups have the tendency to be one note in both usage and symbolism, so seeing the Avatar state not only be super cool and linked to Aang's duty as the Avatar, but also be this terrifying thing not only to his foes, but also himself and his friends, and linked to Aang's loss of identity is, I think it's so good, it's so good. When Aang loses Appa, and thereby also the last living thing he has left from his childhood with the air nomads, his grief is so great that it results in an entire arc where Aang has to deal with this loss. In the desert, the ocean-like sand dunes stretch out for what seems to be forever, perfectly capturing how loss can seem so all-consuming with no end. Aang grapples with anger and emotionally isolates himself to avoid facing the hurt. He does this to avoid hurting others. And I think this is a really noble way of coping with grief without ever actually processing it. Because when you don't let yourself feel anything, you can't face yourself truly. In the 12th episode of the second season, Katara says something vaguely similar to what Aang says to Katara in the Southern Raiders. But rather than forgiveness, she's talking about hope.
I know sometimes it hurts more to hope, but you have to promise me that you won't stop caring. Come on, you need a hug.
Thank you for your concern, Katara.
Aang eventually does feel better by letting himself feel hope and love instead of anger and grief, and they end up finding Appa a couple of episodes later. But I wanted to focus on what Aang felt in that first episode when he had to deal with the loss of Appa.
You saw what I did out there. I was so angry about losing Appa I couldn't control myself. I hated feeling like that.
This is one of the reasons I really like Aang. Even though he's not fully healed from the experience, he's still introspecting and reflecting on his own behavior, thinking about what kind of person he wants to be. It's not that Aang can't understand Katara's feelings in the Southern Raiders. He precisely does understand. He just doesn't agree that revenge is what she needs. So because I'm such an Aang enthusiast, one might assume that I'd think that Katara doesn't need to explore her dark side, that she needs to forgive and let go just like Aang wanted her to. But here's the kicker. I don't think Katara is ready for that in this episode. And I do think that Zuko is actually really helpful and important to her for this exact reason. And I wouldn't be upset if this is why a lot of people ship Zutara. It's a pretty good reason to ship two people. Zuko helps her, supports her in her endeavors, and gives her space to feel her feelings. But you have to admit that so does Aang. Aang helps Katara countless times throughout the series. He is most definitely supportive of her endeavors, and when his help and support is not enough for her, or when he disagrees with her, he gives her the space she needs to feel her feelings. Aang is never angry with Katara in this episode, despite what people say. He never treats her like she's stupid for going through this or having these impulses. He sees her and doesn't shy away from facing her in this state at all.
I almost feel guilty. Mona, you don't have anything to feel guilty for. Oh, good.
Earlier I talked a little bit about this, but I want to get back to the conversation about forgiveness as it pertains to Zuko and Katara. So let's dig a little deeper. So even though Katara and Zuko become friends at the end of the Southern Raiders, forgiveness actually doesn't require friendship or even reconciliation. It's more so a sort of internal thing that happens where a wronged person basically lets go of resentment or anger that they felt towards another person. Maybe it can also be anger that you hold towards yourself, or maybe just the situation in general. Essentially, it's about acceptance. Acceptance of the fact that something happened that hurt you, and then being able to let go of that. Acceptance that someone else did something to you, acceptance that they had their own reasons for doing so, and that the hurt they inflicted onto you, while being real and having an effect on you, was not actually about you. We see this in Avatar. Zuko hurt Katara not because of who Katara is. It was always about Zuko, just like how Katara's inability to forgive has everything to do with her. Zuko even almost says exactly this in the episode.
But I want you to tell me what happened to your mother. I think somehow she's connected her anger about that to her anger at me.
When Zuko chooses to go back to the Fire Nation, he betrays Katara, but more importantly, he betrays himself. Likewise, when Katara holds on to the resentment that resulted from that decision, it is similarly hurtful to Zuko, but more importantly, it's very hurtful to herself. Both of their darkest moments are the same lesson taught to the other person. This isn't about you. So because of this, some of their most important relationship-defining instances are surrounded with this gloom, and consequently this becomes what their relationship is. Sorta. There is definitely an argument to be made that all that Zutara is this slobbering, dramatic puddle of teen angst, but I don't agree with that assessment. Even if I am not a Zutara shipper, as one calls it, I still love their relationship, and if all they were was this caricature of a toxic relationship, I don't think it would be as big of a phenomenon as it is. What I instead think is that Zuko enables Katara in her darkest moment, which can definitely be a bad thing. But again, I think this is kind of what she actually needed in this episode. She needed him to help her see what she was capable of. And in the end, it was an overall positive experience for her, since it gave her closure when it came to Zuko, and it kind of healed her, in a way. As for Zuko, I don't think Katara makes him darker, necessarily. He doesn't really need help with that, to be honest.
Come on! Strike me! You've never held back before!
No, I instead think Katara's relationship to Zuko helps to illustrate just how broken Zuko's relationship with Azula is, as well as give Zuko a new path forward towards redemption and away from his trauma. Now, hear me out. I'm not saying that Katara is Zuko's sister or anything. I'm not gonna shame people for liking them together under the guise of being against it because they feel like siblings. That's ridiculous, and I hate when people do that. It's just so unnecessary. We know why. We know why you think certain characters are sibling coded. It's because you actually don't like them together and you just want to find a reason to bash on people who do. But think about it. There was a reason why Zuko and Katara went to face off against Azula in the finale. Just like how Zuko and Aang are yin and yang, Katara and Azula are also foils for each other. Zuko and Azula's relationship is not very good. In their final Agni Kai, Azula is slipping into insanity. She is not doing well at all, and her instability causes her to target Katara, who was meant to just be a bystander. In my opinion, this was not just a coincidence. Zuko jumps in front of Katara, risking his life, yes, for a new friend, but more importantly, he risked it for someone Azula sees as lower than her, a peasant from the Southern Water Tribe. But a peasant who nonetheless means something to Zuko, her brother, who she is fighting right now. Of course, Zuko doesn't want to kill Azula, but that doesn't matter here. Azula and Zuko are farther apart than they have ever been. This is the first time that her big brother actually pities her. He's always been inferior to her, always been lucky to be born. But now, in their final confrontation, Zuko is the one looking down on her. A girl who lost her closest friends. A girl who pushed everyone away from her. A girl whose mother fears her. Their journeys throughout the story couldn't have been more opposite. Zuko is confident, honorable, and he's finally gained full clarity of his place in the world. Azula is erratic, scared, and most importantly, she's alone. Clearly is this contrast shown as we see the warmth of Zuko's fire clashing against the cool blue flames Azula creates. Blue flames that later clash against blue water, the opposite of fire, the opposite of Azula, Katara. People sometimes call Katara Aang's prize, and even though I get why seeing your partner as a prize in real life is not the perfect relationship model for most people, in a narrative sense, it's not really an inherently bad thing. It's not like Aang views Katara as an object. He respects her agency, except for one moment that he regrets immediately. People only say that she's his prize because he wants to be with her and then gets to be with her. And since they don't understand Katara, they assume that she doesn't actually want to be with Aang, or that her wanting to be with him is only due to the writers using Aang as some sort of self-insert character or something. A little ironic considering the fact that Zutara stands a lot of the time project onto Katara. Oops! Let's pretend I didn't say that. More than Katara being Aang's prize, I view her like his anchor. I say I view, but actually the show is pretty clear about the fact that Aang's attachment to Katara is a microcosm of his attachment to the world at large, and it makes up a considerable part of his characterization. I actually see a lot of critique when it comes to this part of Avatar, or rather, I see a lot of people with the opinion that Aang's attachment to Katara was a flaw, a defect within him. And while I am sympathetic to, I guess you'd call it detachment theory, my reading of the show is that there needs to be harmony between your emotions and wants and your higher spiritual needs. Yes, Aang needs to master the Avatar state to have a bigger chance of defeating the Fire Lord, but at the same time, it is his attachment to his values and the people he loves that brought him to victory in the end. Likewise, his duties as the Avatar need to take priority over all else unless they force Aang to shirk his humanity. When Aang actually lets go of Katara during the battle in the Season 2 finale, Aang gets narratively punished for it. And Katara is the one to bail him out and heal him back to life. The show, whether intentionally or not, is sending a clear message that the Avatar state, the power that comes with Aang's extraordinary title, will never be more reliable or important than the ordinary relationships that he forms with the people around him, as well as his relationship to himself and his values. And yeah, it's not surprising that Katara makes it difficult for Aang to access the Avatar state, since she is the antidote to it. Remember again, the Avatar state, while being really cool, is not pleasant. It is simply overwhelming power. What Aang chooses to do with that power is what makes it good, not the power in and of itself. And the fact that Katara is consistently able to pull Aang out of that haze of power is nothing short of spectacular, and it speaks to the power of their relationship.
I'll call you later.
So, where is it?
I think we can all agree that Katara is at a different part of her healing journey than Aang is at. Maybe she'll be here forever, but that doesn't change the fact that Aang's outlook during this episode was 100% the healthiest one. And I think it's the one Katara favors generally too. She wants to believe, she wants to love. And before you say, oh, come on, everyone wants to believe in love, I have to point out that Zuko's story is not one of hope or love. Even though those two concepts certainly play a role, it's not what Zuko's character strives towards. No, I would argue Zuko hoping has nothing to do with his character. In fact, the time where we see Zuko struggle the most is when he's hoping for a future that he doesn't actually want when he gets it. Zuko's hope and his need are diametrically opposed for the majority of the series, because he lacks clarity. And even when he gains it, his story is more about redemption than it is about hope or love. His most defining moment is when he stands up for himself against his father, finally daring to speak his mind and stand up for the right thing. Katara doesn't have much to learn or gain from Zuko in that aspect, because Katara doesn't need anyone to tell her to stand up for what's right. She does it instinctively, and she's on the right side of the war from the start, so what Zuko could represent for Katara was explored through forgiveness, and after that, honestly, there's not much more than I'm seeing. And here's where I have to fervently disagree with people who say that Kataang is a couple that disregards what Katara wants in favor of Aang getting his wishes. Katara expresses from the moment that she first meets Aang that he already means the world to her. She wants to be close to him, and she wants to go where he goes, because I think Aang facilitates the version of Katara that she herself wants to be. He's gentle and loving with her and brings out her playful side, and most importantly, Aang gives Katara hope. I know that it's like a joke in the fandom, but it's not a coincidence that Katara is always talking about hope. It's not just that she has a lot of it, it's that she greatly values it. She values it, so she seeks it out and tries to hold on to it for dear life. In comparison, I don't know if Katara wants to be the version of herself that Zuko facilitates. And I don't know if she greatly values vengeance, even when she's seeking it out. When you choose a path in life, should you choose the one with the most temptations to go against your own values, or should you choose the path that leads you closer to the things you cherish? It is my opinion and belief that Katara has to be with Aang, not because Aang wants it, not because the writers want it, but because Aang is the only character that consistently gives Katara hope in the show. I understand the aesthetic appeal of Zutara. I understand the attachment to Katara's response to pushback during the confrontation between her and Sokka and Aang, and why it's nice to see Zuko by her side when Aang couldn't be. I think a lot of Zutara shippers are also not saying that Zutara fits better with the themes of Avatar, and are mostly going off of vibes and projection, as well as a romanticization of tense moments between them. And that's fine too. I don't want anyone to feel genuinely stupid for just appreciating a ship, especially if they do so in a casual manner, but I do hope that this can sort of show why I think The Southern Raiders is a great episode that actually proves why Aang is still the right one for Katara, by providing us with a look into her darkest moment, one that she does not want to be in, even though she feels that she has to because of her trauma. I mentioned earlier how Katara's harsh words are used as a metric for how far she is willing to go in this episode. Further into the episode, Katara decides to take an even bigger step in the name of vengeance. She bloodbends. Remember that she vowed to never bloodbend. She saw it as a truly evil action, and if Katara is engaging in behavior that she views as negative, then it should be obvious that she's not closer to the version of herself that she wants to be in this moment. I posed a question in a different part about why some people were quick to dismiss Katara's character arc, her place in the story, and why her feelings for Aang were put into question so often. What could the show have done wrong to make the audience so split on her romantic prospects and storyline? But this question was simply a farce, a reason for me to delve deeper. You see, I don't think there needs to be some big reason why people misunderstood Katara in so many ways. I have my explanations for why she's divisive for some, and why Zutara is so well liked, despite it obviously never being unclear that the endgame relationship was going to be Katara and Aang. I don't think the showrunners made a mistake. I don't think Katara was poorly written at all. I don't think putting her together with Aang was some sort of slight to her character. People are not a monolith, interestingly enough. There are a million different reasons for a million different people to like Zutara more or dislike the way the argument scene in The Southern Raiders went down, and it can all still be unfounded. The romance in Avatar has never been loud. It's not passionate above all else, but it doesn't have to be. I said earlier in the video, yes, it'd be nice if some stories had their relationship arcs completed in the middle of the show, since sometimes their conclusions feel shoehorned into the finale, and it might feel kind of ironic that I'm making a video so ardently defending Katara and Aang when their resolution literally is the final thing that we see in the finale. I think I definitely went through a period of misunderstanding or not looking deep enough into Aang and Katara's relationship arc because I never really saw specific praise for it. So I just assumed that it was one of the weaker aspects of the show because I didn't think thoroughly enough about it myself to reach my own conclusion. Even people who liked them together or didn't care either way didn't specifically tout about how it was well written or important, at least not from what I saw. Sometimes actually stating full on that it was bad. But damn, I'm realizing lately that even that part of the show is pretty darn solid. And if you were gonna make any other couple the final couple, the endgame couple, it would just throw off the entire balance of the show. Not even just plot-wise, but I think it's almost disrespectful to claim that Zutara would have fit Avatar's themes better than Kataang, when Kataang represents like the very cornerstone of what Avatar seems to be trying to tell its audience. Even for all its complexities, Avatar: The Last Airbender is, at the end of the day, a sweet story, not a fiery, passionate one. Sure, it has intense moments and cool action scenes, but Aang ends up defeating the Fire Lord through the literal purity of his soul, even though he had the chance to stone him to death seconds prior. I saw this thread the other day on Twitter. It wasn't about Zutara, but about Zuko's redemption arc, and yes, I'm using a tweet in my YouTube video to contextualize my takes. How about you relax and live a little? Anyway, it brought something really important up, I think. See, Zuko acts in this episode like Aang is being phony or silly for wanting Katara to choose forgiveness, for asking her to not end this man's life. And even though this comparison that I'm about to make might seem unfair, since this man has probably done way more harm to the world than 16-year-old Zuko has, but Zuko's redemption would not have been possible were it not for this exact phony and silly philosophy of Aang's. I think it's telling that the main character of the story is someone who would choose peace and harmony over power if given the chance. Likewise, it's telling that the love interest is someone who wants peace and harmony more than anything. The final scene of the show had to be with Katara and Aang, because no other plotline truly embodies this like Aang's love for Katara and Katara's love for Aang. Earlier, I mentioned the fact that a lot of people read Kataang being endgame as Aang winning the prize being Katara, but I think it's worth it to note that Katara ended up with the person who played the biggest part in ending the war that's been the root cause of almost all of her suffering. And I just don't think you can earnestly say that that's a bad thing, or even that it goes against who Katara really is. Aang symbolizes the thing Katara needs the most. He is what gives her strength. Aang is Katara's prize just as much as she is his. Not because they get to kiss each other, but because being in each other's lives is already a gift. And the kiss at the end helps to illustrate what they've been fighting for. Love. The Avatar's love. For me, this episode is great because it doesn't rush Katara along her journey. She's allowed to feel what she feels, and even though she doesn't reach the conclusion of her healing journey, the episode doesn't feel the need to diminish the progress that she does make in favor of lifting its other characters up. Katara gets to have the last word, and she gets to disagree with Aang. We get to meet her fully where she's at. I think this episode is incredibly mature and important, partly because the difference between Zutara's and Aang's respective opinions on forgiveness are mirrored in the response to the episode by its audience. Plus a lot of Katara hatred, because of course, it exposes the very real fear people have of embracing forgiveness, because like Aang said, forgiveness is really hard. And being on the journey is not wrong. Being unsure about how to deal with your trauma is not wrong either. And I think that's gonna be like it. This video is so freaking long, and I actually want to, it's been like 1.5 years in the making, so please like it, please enjoy it, or else I'm gonna cry. Please, I love